He painted some of the brightest light in Polish art, fields, gardens, water catching the sun. He was young, talented, and finally winning. Then, at the height of it, he did something almost nobody could understand. In front of crowds who came to admire him, something that shocked a whole city. People still argue about what he did, but the real reason was quietly heartbreaking. This is the story of Władysław Podkowinski. Outside Poland, you may not have heard his name. He was born in Warsaw in 1866, a city under Russian rule, crowded, watched and pushing into the industrial age. His father worked on the railways. 4 months after Władysław was born, there was an accident near Piotrków. His father was killed. His mother was barely 21. She raised him with money that was never quite enough. That shortage followed him. Even when art began to open doors, money still had to be earned elsewhere. He made his name first as an illustrator, drawing the life of the city for the Warsaw magazines. His drawings were sharp, real, and exact. He was good enough that older painters noticed him, and Wojciech Gerson helped him into the illustrated press. But that kind of work was changing. A camera could now do the very thing the realist illustrator was prized for. So the young illustrator needed to find something a camera could not do. He found it in Paris, and what he found there was light. When Podkowinski first brought his new light back to Warsaw, people did not call it beautiful. They called it ridiculous. The critics actually tore into him. They said he had thrown away everything a painter was supposed to know, but up close, his pictures fell apart into a mess of dabs and dashes. To a city raised on dark, careful, finished painting, this looked like a man who had forgotten how to paint. One reviewer said the pictures dazzled from a distance and fell apart up close. And yet, this was the same man whose drawings had once been praised for being exact. He'd not forgotten how to paint, he was after something else. To understand why it looked so strange, you have to go back to Paris. In 1889, Podkowinski travelled to Paris with his closest friend, the painter Józef Pankiewicz. Paris was the centre of the art world. Every young painter wanted to be there. And in Paris, the two of them found Impressionism, a way of painting that threw out the dark studio and the careful finish. Painters in Paris were trying to catch a single moment of light before it changed. Pure colour, laid down in broken strokes, meant to shimmer. This was the opposite of everything Warsaw had taught him. When he came home, the new colour looked wrong to Warsaw. To Warsaw, it looked too bright, too strange, and far too French. But he kept going, and then he left the city for the countryside. In the summers of the early 1890s, Podkowinski stayed at country houses east of Warsaw. Mokrowiec, Grzeszczyn. Away from the noise and the deadlines, something opened up for him. He painted gardens. He painted sunlight itself falling through leaves onto grass. He painted children playing. This was where the new colour found its subject. Slowly, the colour stopped looking like a joke and began to look like the future. And it was in these summers, in these houses, surrounded by this light, that something else began to happen. Among the people he painted was a woman, married and out of reach. He did not know it yet, but she would be the centre of everything that happened next. By now, Podkowinski was one of the most sought-after young painters in Warsaw. He could give a sitter exactly what they came for: dignity, weight, a serious face, and a serious room. Work like this paid the bills, and it reassured the people who bought it. But look closer, and you can feel him pushing at the edges of it. The colour starts to break apart, with flickers of green and orange running through the skin. whole room seems to vibrate instead of sitting still. In another portrait, the face itself dissolves into pure colour, the work of a man who had been to Paris and could not go back to painting the old way. He painted fashionable women in colour that still looked new, confident, alive, a little daring for its moment. And then there were the quieter ones. He painted children without making them too sweet. This one looked slightly away from us, caught deep in a thought of her own. And sometimes he caught something he was probably never meant to see. Two women lean close in the middle of a conversation, and one of them looks as though she has just heard something that she cannot answer. He was good, really good, but the faces tell you something the success did not. This was a man still searching, never quite settling, always reaching for the next way of painting. And that searching was about to take him somewhere much darker. At the edge of all that light, something was happening to his body. Claude Kavinsky had tuberculosis. In the 19th century, that could mean a slow death sentence. He seems to have known what was coming, and slowly you can see something change in the work. The light does not vanish all at once, but it begins to cool. The gardens give way to deeper woods, and the figures begin to walk away from us, off into the trees. Night enters the paintings. Firelight on dark water, a face caught pale in the gloom, watching something we cannot see. A pale, ghostly procession glowing in the dark. A single small figure stands off to the side, one arm thrown up against the black. He gave it the name of a piece of music, Chopin's Funeral March. It is hard not to read a painting like this as the work of a man looking straight at his own death. That reading may be too neat, but the shift is real, and it happened as the illness took hold. There was something else pulling at him in these years. Back in those bright country summers, Claude Kavinsky had fallen in love. The woman most accounts point to was Eva Kortabinska. She was married with children and older than him, completely out of reach. The same summers that gave him his best light gave him a love he could not have. By the end of 1892, something between them seems to have broken. He stopped going back to those houses. And then, ill in love with someone out of reach and turning darker by the month, he began the painting that would define him. A naked woman clings to the neck of a huge black horse. The horse rears out of darkness, eyes rolling, mouth open. Behind them, almost nothing but black. He'd been carrying the idea for years. The first sketches go back to his time in Paris. This was not a sudden picture. It came up slowly out of the same darkness as the funeral march and the night scenes. There is a story about where the image comes from. One of the women at those country houses, Vincentina Karska, was once carried off by a bolting horse, her long hair coming loose as it ran. Claude Kavinsky is said to have told her afterwards that it looked like a frenzy. Whether that story is exact or not, the image clearly came from somewhere deep. He worked on it through the autumn and winter of 1893. By the end, he was painting it almost from his bed. It was enormous though, more than 3 metres tall, with the figures close to life-sized. When it finally went on show in Warsaw, it was hung alone in its own room. Some people were disgusted, and some called it one of the strongest works Polish art had produced in years. Nobody could ignore it. For weeks it hung there, and the whole city argued about it. And then, a few days before the exhibition was due to close, Claude Kavinsky walked into the gallery. He asked the attendant for a ladder. He set it up against the wall, climbed up, and took out a knife. Then he began to cut. He slashed the canvas 16 times. Many of the cuts fell across the woman. painting that 12,000 people had come to see was torn open in a few minutes by the man who made it. Then he climbed down and left. Warsaw could not understand it, and the papers reached for easy answers: a publicity stunt, wounded pride, madness. Lloyd Kavinsky never gave a clear answer. When a friend said he must be very unhappy, he only smiled and replied, "You think I'm not?" The truth is sadder than any of the theories. By the time he picked up that knife, he was running out of time. The tuberculosis was advancing. The woman he loved was beyond reach, and there were whispers that the painting had shown too much of his own heart. Whatever the exact reason, it does not feel like a trick. It feels like grief. A man cutting into the thing he had poured himself into because he could not bear what it held. I think he spent a lot of his life looking for a style, but no matter how beautifully he painted water or light or a face, nothing quite prepares you for the first time you see frenzy. He died less than a year later in January 1895. He was 28 years old. The painting was repaired after his death, thanks to his mother. It still hangs in a museum in Krakow, but most people know Lloyd Kavinsky now only for this one image. They remember the horse, the woman, and the knife. The gardens come later, they come at all, and so do the children in the grass and the sunlight through the orchard trees. That is the strange afterlife of Władysław Lloyd Kavinsky. The knife kept his name alive. It also buried almost everything else that he made. Lloyd Kavinsky turned away from the visible world in his final year towards something darker and more inward. A few hundred miles away, another young painter took that same turn and kept going until his pictures stopped looking like the world at all. He heard music in colour, painted the creation of the world as a symphony, and died in an asylum before the rest of the world caught up with him. His name was Mikalojus Konstantinos Corleonis. That is the next story. Click the thumbnail for the full video